I recognize that this is a challenging experience for everybody involved. And in my career at NASA, there was always opportunities to be anxious. There were opportunities to be even frightened by what I was getting ready to do, whether it was launching on a rocket, whether it was doing a spacewalk, coming home in a spacecraft. Certainly can be a scary moment. But what I always found that made me and helped me get through that is that when I focused on the things that I had control over, my job, um, my knowledge and education that prepared me for what I was trying to do, a certain level of attention to detail, the rules, at NASA, we have flight rules that we follow. When I focused in on those things, it caused me to be less scared, less anxious. And I think, we're kind of in a similar situation now where we are all, probably for the first time in my life, engaged in one singular event as a species, fighting this pandemic. And this is our mission. So I encourage the kids out there, to focus on the stuff they have control over, taking care of their environment, listening to their parents, learning. What a great opportunity it is to learn when you have very little else to do, right? I think it's a great time too for kids. I was not a great student growing up. And, I never really had the opportunity to make a recovery until I got to college and found some inspiration. But you do now. For me, inspiration was very important. I found it in a book written by Tom Wolfe called The Right Stuff. And look for inspiration wherever you can find it. Be engaged, follow the rules, the guidance, do your very best. And if we all do that, we will get through this together. I never actually thought it was possible for me. It was just too lofty a goal for a kid that wasn't a good student. But what I learned is that if you find inspiration, and then if that inspiration can make you focus, when I read the book, The Right Stuff, I recognized there were traits that the guys had, these fighter pilots that became test pilots, that became the original Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts. There were traits that these guys had that I felt deeply that I had in common with them, with only one exception. I mean, besides the fact that I didn't know how to fly an airplane, but as far as a basic skill, was that I was not a good student. And I thought, if I could just become a good student, it would just open up the whole world to me. And maybe I could be a pilot in the military, maybe even a Navy pilot. And maybe if not a Navy pilot, maybe a pilot in the Air Force. Who knows, right? That was a joke. I apologize to the Air Force people out there. I love Air Force guys. I've been in space with some of them. But, maybe possibly a test pilot, long shot, maybe even an astronaut. So it shows, how very important inspiration is, and finding that thing that inspires you. The other thing NASA looks for is people that demonstrate teamwork. Teamwork is so important. When you are trying to solve complex problems, you don't do it as an individual. Rarely is that an individual act. Most often, it is things that are challenging and difficult are done as part of a team. So someone who has demonstrated good teamwork, leadership, attention to detail. I think there's a misconception on the public about why people think like flying in space is so great. Things like launching on the rocket, looking out at planet Earth, floating, which is fun, but makes most things, very challenging to do. And yeah, all those things are great, but the best part about it, and I think the big misconception, at least in my case, is that we don't fly in space because we like to ride the rocket or come back in the capsule or the space shuttle. We fly in space because it's an incredibly complicated, challenging thing to do. And we get to do this work with people that are dedicated, that are smart, that are great teammates, not just the people you're with, but the people on the ground at well, that are motivated to work on something in a collaborative, cooperative way, a common goal. And it's something that has serious consequences if you don't do your job properly. And that's what I always liked about it. And the people involved too. That thought kind of takes me back to the beginning of this. We are right now collectively on the same mission. We are doing something that is extremely complicated, and we are doing it in a cooperative way. And it has serious consequences if we don't all follow the guidance and do our jobs well. So I encourage people to look at our collective experience right now in dealing with this pandemic as our shared mission. I never felt lonely. I felt very connected to people, in fact, on planet Earth through technology. And the way we did that was we had a phone. It wasn't like a normal phone, but it was like voice over internet kind of phone. Kind of like how we're talking right now, how the audio is working. We had email, we had video conferencing capability. So even though I was in space for 340 days, I was never by myself, but sometimes there was a 6-week period where I was there with 2 Russian cosmonauts, but I was never lonely. And it's because I took the opportunities that I had, used the technology I had to stay connected with people of Earth. And I think we can do that now. I think most people can. Again, not everyone's situation is the same. I'm sure there are people out there that are by themselves and have very little technological capability to connect with others. And I feel for those folks. But if you do have that ability, use it. And I found that, you always want to find the good parts in things that are bad. And one of the good things I found about this is, having the time now, but because I am, in quarantine basically here, similar to the quarantine we do at NASA, as a matter of fact, before we launch into space, that is I have a lot more time on my hands to connect with friends and family around the world. Actually, yesterday, I had a 45-minute Zoom call with Misha Kornienko, my Russian brother from another mother who I spent nearly a year in space with, and Sergei Volkov, who the 3 of us came back on the Soyuz in March of 2016. And it was great. We talked for 45 minutes, and I had not seen Sergei in years. I saw Misha. I've seen Misha more recently, but not only have I connected with them, and they're on the other side of the world, but friends and family near and far. So I encourage people to try to do that, and that will hopefully fight, and abate any kind of loneliness they may have. Birthdays and holidays are very, very important in space. When your days are very, very similar, and you are in a routine that seemingly doesn't change much, taking every opportunity to change it is very, very important. So we recognize many holidays in space. Birthdays were big ones. We would often give each other presents. I flew some wrapping paper for birthdays and Christmas and other holidays in part of my gear I could bring for myself. A few times I brought, in some cases, I was thoughtful enough to bring some presents. I remember I gave Gennady Padalka, a cosmonaut who spent more days in space than any other human. Fantastic guy. I gave him a U.S. Navy hat with Navy wings on it that I brought up. I gave Misha on his birthday a Leatherman tool that I wrapped up. Sometimes, you might not be as thoughtful. I've flown in space with a lot of people, and maybe you don't recognize you're going to be there with somebody's birthday. You think about it, but sometimes you may just give them something as simple as like your favorite dessert. You wrap it up. Well, the best thing is the fact that you're part of this mission that is much larger than yourself as an individual. Like I said, something that has serious consequences, working, hard at it, not only the time you're in space, but the preparation, the dedication is almost total when you have a job like this. And then doing it with a team of people that you respect, that you enjoy being around. Uh, and again, not just your colleagues in space, but the people that train you to get there, the engineers, the technicians, the scientists, all so very dedicated. It's almost like, to digress a little bit, it's almost like that kind of dedication that I experienced at NASA is the kind of dedication I see today, but not, in the neutral buoyancy laboratory where we learn to do spacewalks.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the grocery store. It's, people that are public servants, people that are on the front lines of this pandemic. You just see, how absolutely dedicated they are. And, some of these people are often overlooked before this. And I hope we never overlook them again, because without them, we wouldn't be able to survive. I mean, the people that, provide, the supply chain in this country, which is absolutely critical.